The grand mansion, once filled with quiet but reassuring presence, now felt hollow. Every corner echoed with silence, and the absence of the old woman weighed heavily on him. He had never expected to feel this way. When he had first married her, he thought of her as nothing more than a stranger, someone he had been forced to be with. But now, as he stood alone in the vast house she had left behind, he realized that she had become more than just a part of his life. She had been his protector, his mentor, and in a way, his family. Grief settled over him in ways he could not understand. He had shed no tears at the funeral, standing quietly as people whispered about how lucky he was, how he had inherited everything. But behind closed doors, he felt lost. The weight of his new reality was suffocating. For the first time in his life, he had wealth, power, and status. But he also had responsibilities he wasn't prepared for. The businesses she had built were now his to manage. He had never imagined himself as a businessman, but now dozens of employees depended on him. The mansion, once her pride, now felt like a prison of memories. Documents piled up on his desk, contracts, bank statements, decisions he had to make. He had spent his entire life trying to escape poverty. Yet now that he had everything, he felt no freedom at all. Doubt crept in. Could he handle this life? Did he even deserve it? The world saw him as a young man who had struck fortune through marriage, but no one saw the turmoil inside him. He had been given everything, but in losing her, he had lost more than he could explain. The whispers never stopped. Even after the old woman's passing, society refused to accept him. If anything, the judgment grew worse. Before, people had mocked him for marrying her. Now, they accused him of something far worse: manipulation, greed, and deception. He planned this all along. He waited for her to die so he could take everything. What did she see in him? He must have tricked her somehow. No matter where he went, the looks followed, some filled with envy, others with contempt. He could hear their voices even when they weren't speaking. To them, he was nothing more than a poor boy who had struck gold, a man who had played the role of a devoted husband just long enough to secure his fortune. But society's whispers were the least of his problems. Soon, the legal battles began. Distant relatives of the old woman, people who had never cared for her in life, suddenly emerged to challenge his inheritance. They claimed he had no right to what she left behind, that he had manipulated her into giving him everything. Lawsuits were filed and headlines spread, painting him as a gold digger, a fraud, someone who had taken advantage of an old, vulnerable woman. The courtrooms became his new battleground. Lawyers on the other side dug into his past, trying to paint a picture of a desperate boy who had schemed his way into wealth. Every decision she had made, every property she had transferred to his name, every business she had entrusted to him, was now under scrutiny. He had never been more aware of how fragile his position was. As the world turned against him, so did the people he once knew. His family, who had once ignored his suffering, suddenly reappeared. Their words were full of false concern, their eyes filled with greed. You should share some of what she left you. After all, we're family. She helped you, but what about us? Don't forget where you came from. They spoke as if they had always been there for him, as if they had lifted him up when he was drowning. But he remembered the truth, how they had let him suffer, how they had never once offered him a way out. Now they saw him as a walking opportunity, a man with more wealth than he knew what to do with. Then there were the so-called friends, who had once pitied him. Some of them acted as if nothing had changed, pretending to be supportive. But their true intentions became clear soon enough. You're rich now. Let's celebrate. Lend me some money, just a little. You won't even notice it's gone. You owe me, don't you think? I was there when you had nothing. The few people he had trusted began to reveal their true faces. Some tried to manipulate him. Others abandoned him when he refused to give them what they wanted. It became painfully clear that wealth had not made his life easier. It had only made it lonelier. For the first time, he understood what the old woman had endured. The same society that had once mocked her now spoke of her with reverence, pretending they had respected her all along. And the same people who had dismissed him before now saw him as a prize to be won. He had fought so hard to escape poverty, but now he wondered if he had simply walked into a different kind of prison, one built not from hunger but from suspicion, isolation, and endless judgment. In the days following the legal battles and society's relentless scrutiny, he found himself drawn to the one place that still carried her presence, the study. The room had always been hers, filled with books, antique furniture, and a lingering scent of old paper and perfume. For weeks he had avoided stepping inside, afraid of the emotions it might stir. But something inside him pushed him forward. If he was going to carry her legacy, he needed to understand her beyond the version of her the world had known. As he opened drawers and sorted through her belongings, he expected to find nothing more than financial records and business documents. Instead, he found something far more valuable: letters, journals, and old photographs hidden in a locked box at the back of a cabinet. The first letter he unfolded was written in her delicate handwriting, but the words sent chills down his spine. To the world, I am a woman of wealth and power, but to myself, I am something else entirely, a woman who has lived a life no one truly understands. Page after page, he read through her hidden past. She had not always been the strong, unshakable figure he had known. Once, she had been just like him, young, alone, struggling to survive in a world that showed no mercy. She had come from nothing, a childhood of hardship, a youth filled with betrayals, a life spent clawing her way to success. Every decision she had made, every business deal, every calculated move had been done with one goal: to never be powerless again. But it was not just her rise to power that shocked him. It was her reason for choosing him. One journal entry stood out among the rest. I see myself in him. The same desperation, the same hunger to escape a life that offers nothing but suffering. When I look at him, I remember the girl I once was. Perhaps that is why I made this choice. Not out of love, but out of recognition. A chance to rewrite a story I once lost control of. His hands trembled as he set the journal down. All this time, he had believed their marriage had been a strange, calculated arrangement. He had assumed she had chosen him for convenience or out of loneliness. But the truth was different. She had chosen him because she understood him in a way no one else ever had. It had never been about wealth or obligation. It had been about giving him what she had once needed: an opportunity, a way out, a second chance. As he stared at the pages before him, he felt something shift inside him. For the first time, he no longer saw himself as a victim of fate. He saw himself as a part of her story. And now, it was up to him to decide how that story would continue. Days after uncovering the truth about her past, he received an urgent call from the estate lawyer. The voice on the other end was calm yet firm, asking him to visit the office immediately. Something about the way the lawyer spoke made his stomach tighten. Had another lawsuit been filed? Was there another relative trying to take what was his? When he arrived, the lawyer handed him an envelope sealed with the old woman's personal emblem. This is a clause in her will that was not to be revealed until now, the lawyer explained. You must read it carefully before making any decisions. His fingers trembled as he broke the seal and unfolded the letter inside. The old woman's familiar handwriting greeted him once more. If you are reading this, it means I am gone. And now, the true test begins. He inhaled sharply and continued. I have left you everything, my wealth, my businesses, my estate, but not without conditions. I gave you these things because I believed in your potential, not because I wanted to hand you an easy life. That is why I have set one final challenge for you. If you accept my inheritance, you must prove that you are worthy of it. He glanced up at the lawyer, who simply nodded. Keep reading, the man said. You have two choices. The first, walk away now. Leave behind the wealth, the businesses, and the power that comes with them. You will receive a small sum to start fresh, but nothing more. If you feel this life is not yours to claim, I will not force it upon you. The second choice, stay, but earn what I have given you. You must take control of everything I built, face every obstacle that comes your way, and prove that you are not just a man who inherited wealth, but a man who can create it. If you fail, you will lose everything. There is no middle ground. He clenched his jaw. It wasn't as simple as accepting an inheritance. It was a test, a challenge left behind by a woman who had never allowed weakness in her life. Whatever choice you make, know that I will not judge you for it. But ask yourself this: do you truly deserve what I have given you? The letter ended there, but the weight of her words settled deep in his chest. For a moment, the idea of walking away tempted him. He could leave behind the expectations, the accusations, the loneliness that came with wealth. He could start fresh, live a quiet life free from society's judgment. Maybe that was what he wanted all along. But then he thought of her story, the struggles she had faced, the battles she had fought. She had not simply given him wealth. She had given him an opportunity to prove that he was more than just a poor boy who had married an old woman for survival. He looked at the lawyer and took a deep breath. What happens if I accept? The lawyer studied him for a long moment. Then you will face challenges, enemies, and responsibilities you have never imagined. But if you succeed, you will not just be rich, you will be powerful. He exhaled slowly. The old woman had given him everything, but now she was asking him to fight for it, and he had never backed down from a fight. I accept, he said. The moment he accepted the challenge, the battle truly began. At first, it was subtle. Business deals falling through, clients suddenly backing out, unexpected financial audits. He thought it was just part of the struggle of taking over an empire he barely understood. But soon, the attacks became personal. One evening, as he was going through documents in the study, his phone buzzed with an anonymous message. You don't belong here. Walk away before it's too late. His grip tightened around the phone. At first, he assumed it was another bitter relative trying to intimidate him. But as the days passed, the threats escalated. A newspaper ran a story about him, claiming he had forged documents to inherit the wealth. False accusations spread like wildfire. People whispered about a secret lover he had supposedly betrayed, an illegitimate deal that never existed. It wasn't just slander, it was a coordinated attack. Then, he heard the name that made everything clear: Razak Khan, a ruthless businessman, a man of influence, and someone who had once been close to the old woman. He had wanted control over her empire for years, but she had never trusted him enough to give him that power. Now that she was gone, He saw an opportunity, and the boy was nothing more than an obstacle in his way. Razak didn't send more warnings, he sent problems. Banks suddenly froze his accounts over fraud concerns. His businesses faced surprise inspections that resulted in heavy fines. Suppliers refused to work with him. Every door that had been open under the old woman's leadership was now slammed shut in his face. But Razak had underestimated one thing. The boy had spent his entire life fighting to survive, and he wasn't about to lose everything now. If Razak wanted a war, he was going to get one. In the midst of battling enemies, legal troubles, and the weight of his inheritance, he never expected his past to come knocking. One evening, after a long day at the office, he walked into his mansion, now more of a fortress than a home, only to find a familiar face waiting for him in the grand hall. Aisha. For a moment, he thought he was imagining things. She looked just as she had in his memories. Soft brown eyes, a quiet strength in her expression, and that same warmth he had once known. But there was something different now. The girl he had once shared his childhood struggles with was now a woman, standing before him with an unreadable expression. "I heard about everything," she said softly. "I had to see you." He didn't know how to respond. Aisha had been a part of his past, the days of hunger, cold nights, and dreams that felt impossible. She had been his closest friend, perhaps even his first love, before life had pulled them apart. He had once thought he would marry her, that they would escape their suffering together. But fate had different plans. When he had been forced into marriage with the old woman, Aisha had disappeared from his life. He had assumed she had moved on, perhaps even despised him for the choices he had made. And yet, here she was, standing in his house, looking at him as if no time had passed. "I know what people say about you," she continued, "but I also know who you really are." Her words stirred something inside him, something dangerous. For months, he had been alone, surrounded by people who either wanted to destroy him or use him. And now, someone from his past was offering him something he had almost forgotten existed. Genuine connection. But could he trust her? The timing of her return was too perfect. He was at his most vulnerable, under attack from enemies he barely understood. And suddenly, she was back. Was it fate, or was it something else? Doubt crept in. Did she come because she missed him, or did she come because he was now a man of power and wealth? His mind told him to be careful, to keep his distance, to not let himself fall into another trap. But his heart, which had been hardened by betrayal after betrayal, wanted to believe in her. "You disappeared," he finally said, his voice quieter than he intended. She lowered her gaze. "I had no choice. I thought..." She hesitated. "I thought you chose her over me." His chest tightened. Was that what she had believed all these years? That he had abandoned her for a life of luxury? That he had willingly walked away from everything they had shared? "It wasn't like that," he said, his voice raw. "I know," she whispered. "That's why I came back." But was it the truth? Or was this just another test, another game in a world where love and betrayal were often the same thing? For the first time since the old woman's death, he felt something stir inside him, something that had nothing to do with power or survival. But the question remained, was Aisha here for him, or for what he had become? The betrayal came when he least expected it. For months, he had been fighting to hold on to everything. The wealth, the businesses, the power. He had battled lawsuits, dodged Razak Khan's schemes, and resisted the doubts clawing at his mind. Through it all, he had clung to one belief, that if he fought hard enough, he would win. But he never saw the knife coming from behind. It wasn't an enemy that destroyed him. It was someone he trusted. One evening, as he entered his office, the air felt off. His employees avoided his gaze, whispers followed him down the hall, and the receptionist barely met his eyes. Then, his lawyer called, with a voice colder than usual. "There's been a development," the man said. Minutes later, he sat in shock as he read the documents before him. His accounts, frozen. His businesses, taken over. His power, gone. All of it had been stolen in a single, calculated move. And the person behind it, Aisha, the woman he had trusted, the woman he had let back into his life, the woman he had started to believe in again. She hadn't come back for him. She had come back for what he had. The betrayal burned deeper than any attack Razak Khan had ever thrown his way. This wasn't just about money. It was about trust, about love, about the cruel realization that he had been nothing more than a pawn in someone else's game. And now he had nothing. For the first time since the old woman's death, he was truly alone. No fortune, no allies, no safety net. Just his name, and the lessons she had taught him. She had always warned him about people, about greed, about how the ones closest to you could be the most dangerous. He had learned that lesson too late. Now, he had a choice. Walk away, disappear, and leave this ruthless world behind, or fight back. Not for wealth, not for revenge, but for himself. He clenched his fists, inhaled sharply, and made his decision. This wasn't over. For the first time in his life, he had nothing. No wealth, no allies, no safety net. Everything had been stripped away, and the world was watching, waiting for him to crumble. They whispered in the streets, in the newspapers, on television. The boy who inherited a fortune, only to lose it all. A fraud, a failure, a fool. He was never meant for that life. But they didn't know him. They didn't know where he had come from. They didn't know that this wasn't the first time he had lost everything. And they didn't know what the old woman had taught him. Money can be taken, power can be stolen, but the real empire is built in the mind. He remembered those words now, stronger than ever. For days, he sat in the ruins of his life, staring at the empty space where his empire once stood. He allowed himself to grieve, to feel the weight of betrayal, to taste the bitterness of failure. But then, something inside him shifted. A memory surfaced, his childhood, the hunger, the cold, the desperation. He had survived that. He would survive this too. But this time, he wasn't just a poor boy trying to escape poverty. He was a man who had seen the world from the top and the bottom. He had learned from the best. He had fought the worst, and he knew exactly what it took to rise again. So, he started. Not with money, not with connections, with strategy. He walked the streets, spoke to people, listened. He studied the businesses he once owned, watching from the outside, learning their weaknesses. He made quiet deals, formed silent alliances, gathered people who had been cast aside like him. Slowly, brick by brick, he built again. The world mocked him at first. They called him desperate, delusional. He's trying to rise from the ashes, but there's nothing left for him. But they didn't see what was coming. Because this time, he wasn't just trying to survive. He was coming back to take everything. The night was quiet, but his mind was not. For months, he had rebuilt himself from nothing. He had clawed his way back from the ruins, stronger, sharper, and more ruthless than before. Every move he made had been calculated, every alliance carefully chosen. The world had laughed at him when he lost everything. Now they were afraid, and tonight it would all come to an end. He sat in the dimly lit office of the skyscraper that had once belonged to him, now occupied by those who had betrayed him. On the surface, it looked like he had lost the war. His enemies, Razak Khan, Aisha, and the others who had plotted against him, had taken everything. But they had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated him. He had spent months gathering evidence, exposing their corruption, their illegal dealings, their hidden crimes. He had played the game in the shadows while they reveled in their stolen victory. Now, the trap was set. The doors swung open. Razak Khan entered first, arrogant as ever, followed by Aisha. She wouldn't meet his eyes. He wasn't sure if that was guilt or strategy, and he no longer cared. The other players followed. Businessmen, politicians, people who had once called him weak. He stood to face them. "You called us here for what?" Razak scoffed. "To beg for your fortune back?" He smiled, but there was no humour in it. "Number, to watch you lose yours." A pause. Then the sound of phones buzzing. Confusion turned to panic as his enemies pulled out their devices, reading the headlines breaking across every major news outlet. Business mogul Razak Khan under investigation for fraud and embezzlement. Insider leaks expose corruption among top industry leaders. Evidence links corporate giants to illegal deals. Authorities step in. Their world was crumbling, just as they had once crumbled his. "You think this will stop me?" Razak snarled, his face red with fury. "I don't think," he said calmly. "I know." The doors burst open again. This time, it was law enforcement. Officers stormed the room, and within moments, arrests were being made. Some fought, some screamed, but Aisha just stood there, silent. When the chaos settled, only the two of them remained. She finally looked at him. "You planned this all along, didn't you?" He exhaled, his fists unclenching. "You should have never come back." Regret flickered in her eyes, but it was too late. Everything was over. He had won, and yet, as he stood there victorious, he felt something unexpected. Emptiness. He had taken back everything, crushed his enemies, reclaimed his power. But at what cost? The old woman's words echoed in his mind. Revenge is easy, but true power is knowing when to let go. He had the power now. The question was, what would he do with it? Would he continue the cycle of destruction, or would he build something greater? The choice was his. And for the first time, he knew exactly what he wanted. The wind carried a quiet stillness as he stood on the balcony, looking down at the city that had once rejected him. The skyline stretched endlessly before him, glittering with life, yet none of it held the same meaning as it once had. For years, he had chased wealth, fought for power, and battled against betrayal. But now, as he stood at the pinnacle of his success, he finally understood. None of it had ever truly been about money. It had always been about purpose. He thought back to the old woman, the one who had started it all, the woman he had once resented, misunderstood, and judged. She had plucked him from the depths of poverty, forced him into a life he never wanted, and left him with burdens too great for a boy to carry. And yet, she had also given him something invaluable: wisdom. At the time, he had seen her as just an old, lonely woman, desperate for companionship. But now, looking back, he realized she had seen something in him that even he hadn't recognized. She had seen not just a survivor, but a leader, someone who could rise from nothing, endure suffering, and still stand strong. Everything she had done, every challenge, every painful lesson, had shaped him into the man he had become. He wasn't just a boy who had married an old woman for survival. He wasn't just a man who had lost everything and fought to take it back. He was more than his wealth, more than his past. He had become someone people respected, not out of fear, not because of his fortune, but because he had earned it, because he had lived through fire and walked out stronger. The city had once whispered his name with mockery. Now they spoke it with admiration. Businesses sought his partnership, not because of his inheritance, but because of his insight. Politicians sought his advice, not because of his power, but because of his influence. People followed him, not because he demanded loyalty, but because he had proven himself worthy of it. For the first time, he truly understood why the old woman had chosen him. She hadn't picked him for companionship. She hadn't picked him because she pitied him. She had picked him because she had seen what he could become. He turned from the balcony, stepping back into his office. The space was different now, no longer a battlefield, but a place of creation, of vision. Papers were stacked neatly on his desk, blueprints for new projects, plans for businesses that weren't just about profit, but about legacy. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. One of his closest advisors entered, a man who had once worked for his enemies, but had now pledged loyalty to him. "Sir," the man said with quiet respect, "the final paperwork has been completed. The foundation is ready to launch." He nodded, a sense of satisfaction settling in his chest. This wasn't just another business venture. It was something far greater. A foundation that would help the poor, the forgotten, the desperate. People like the boy he had once been. The boy who had once cried in helplessness. The boy who had once believed he was nothing. The boy who had once thought he had to choose between survival and dignity. Now he would ensure that no one else had to make that choice. Because he finally understood, wealth wasn't just about numbers in a bank account. Power wasn't about controlling others. True power was lifting others up. True success was leaving behind something that would last beyond his own lifetime. He thought about the people he had lost, the betrayals he had endured, the battles he had fought. It had all led to this moment. The old woman had given him wealth, but more than that, she had given him a destiny. And now, it was time to fulfill it. As he looked at his reflection in the glass, he no longer saw the scared boy who had once been forced into an impossible life. He saw a man who had built his own future, a man who had risen above his past, a man who was finally living the life he was meant to live.